Hey Tara, could I check if am I coming through on video and audio?
I'm sorry, were you talking to me? I just walked away.
I was, sorry. I
Okay,
just
I had
wanted
to let
to
the dog
double
out.
check that I'm coming through in video and audio.
Yes, I can see and hear you perfectly.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Hi, everybody. I'm your court reporter today. Hello.
Good morning. This
I'm
is
just
Mike D'Onofrio. I'm one of the attorneys representing Blue Cross.
okay. Thank you. That's very well. I was just about to ask who everyone was. Wait, give me 1 second.
Sure. And I think if Mike Barber isn't on yet. Good morning, Mr. D'Onofrio. I see Mr.
Good
Schuldeis
morning.
as well.
Morning.
He will be right on.
Great. Great to see you, Miss Barrett. It's been a while.
Very nice to see you too, Mr. D'Onofrio.
Good morning, everyone.
Can I
Good
ask,
morning.
is that like, as far as I can see on my camera, there's nothing weird in my frame, like no bad glares or anything distracting. Are you seeing the same?
Yeah, just a
Thank
white
you.
wall and a window, Mike.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Eric, you look great as usual.
Thank
No
you.
glares or anything.
In a weird, strange factoid at 7:57, this tie is a tie of Tom's of Maine. I went to a yard sale of his, and he happens to be like wildly tall. So I picked up like 7 super tall ties. But it did strike me as odd that it's Tom of Maine.
So wait, you mean the toothpaste?
Yeah, the toothpaste, deodorant, that Tom.
Yeah, that I used like 2 or 3 times a day, every day of my life.
Yeah. Tall man.
I appreciate the bit of Schulteis trivia. I have no good tie story. I bought it in a store 20 years ago.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I hate to break up the conversation about ties. Can everybody let me know who they are and who they represent, who will mostly be speaking? I just want to make sure I have everybody to put in here.
Yes. So I'll start. I'm Mike D'Onofrio, D'Onofrio, and I'm one of the lawyers representing Blue Cross.
Okay, I have you. Anyone else?
I'm Bridget AC, also one of the lawyers representing Blue Cross Vermont.
You're echoing, Bridget.
Bridget, I hear an echo.
Did the echo go away?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we're good.
But you are a little quiet when you muted your computer.
Okay.
My name.
Wait, hold on. Sorry.
Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. Okay, next, please.
Sure. My name is Eric, ERIC, Schulteis, SCHULTHEIS, and I'm an attorney for the Office of the Healthcare Advocate.
Okay.
Susanna, I'll go. You won't hear much from me until much later in the proceeding, but I'm Mike Fisher, the healthcare advocate.
Okay. And can you spell I'm sorry, I know it's on your thing, but can you spell your last name for me real fast?
Sure, FISHER.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Martine Lemieux, Lemieux. I'm the Chief Actuary at Blue Cross.
Okay. I'm sorry, can you spell that for me one more time? I apologize.
Lemieux.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm Michael Barber. I'll be the hearing officer today for the Green Mountain Care Board.
Hi, I'm Laura Beliveau, and I'm staff attorney at the Green Mountain Care Board. And my last name is spelled B as in boy, E-L-I, V as in Victor, E-A-U.
Okay, and your role is one more time? You're an
Staff
attorney for who?
attorney, Green Mountain
Okay.
Care Board.
Hi.
Good morning.
Oh.
So I check my audio. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly fine.
Hi, I'll go next.
Okay.
I'm Ruth Green. RUTHGREENE. And I'm CFO at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Kevin Ruggeberg. That's Rugggeberg. I'm a consulting actuary.
Okay.
There's one more Blue Cross witness who will be joining us a bit later, who's not here yet. I'll give you his name, Dr. Thomas Weigel, Weigel, and he is Blue Cross's Chief Medical Officer.
Okay, I'm probably gonna put I'm assuming the witnesses are gonna change, or is he the only one?
No, there will be several witnesses.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So I'm just gonna put everybody's name in as they start. Just makes my life easier. Okay. Almost ready. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, is that everybody?
The board members will be speaking. Do you need their names?
Yeah, I think I have it. This Mr. Foster, Miss Holmes, Robin Lunge, Dave Merman, Tom Walsh,
Yes.
Laura. Yeah, okay.
And then there's two other witnesses from the Department of Financial Regulation.
Okay, I will add the witnesses as they come up to talk.
Okay.
But I can, if that's everybody for now, I can be ready to go on the record.
Mike, can you hear me okay? I'm having a little bit of computer difficulty. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Do you want to give it a minute, sort things out?
Let's try, and I'll turn it over to you. And if I need to go to phone or something, I'll make the switch. But All right, so I'll call to order the Green Mountain Care Board's hearing of July 22nd, 2024 for a rate review hearing on the submissions of Blue Cross Blue Shield Vermont. Our General Counsel, Mike Barber, has been designated the hearing officer for today's hearing, and I'll turn it over to Hearing Officer Barber.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Ms. Gearing, is it? Can we go on the record, please?
Yes, we are now on the record. The time is 8:06 a.m.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Barber. As Chair Foster said, I'm the board's general counsel, and I'll be serving as the hearing officer for today's hearing. The hearing is being held remotely via Microsoft Teams. The purpose of this hearing is to take evidence and argument on Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Vermont's 2025 individual and small group rate filings. The docket number for the individual rate filing is GMCB-003-24RR, and the docket number for the small group rate filing is GMCB-004-24RR. The hearing is being held pursuant to 8 VSA Section 4062, as well as Section 2.307 of the Green Mountain Care Board's Rate Review Rule, Rule 2. It looks like we have all 5 board members with us this morning. We also have Michael D'Onofrio and Bridget Acey from the law firm of Striss and Mayer, LLP, who are representing Blue Cross today. Representing the interests of health insurance consumers is Eric Schulteis from the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. And Eric, is it just you, or is Charles also here? I can't see him.
Charles is also on, but I'll be primary. I'll be the only one on camera in most cases.
Okay. The board's attorney, Laura Beliveau, is also here. She'll be leading the direct testimony of the board's contract actuaries from Lewis and Ellis, and may also have questions for other witnesses. We are recording today's hearing. We also have a court reporter here to transcribe the proceedings. We will provide the parties with a copy of the transcripts when we receive them. Because we are holding this hearing remotely, before we get any further, I just want to make sure that we did a little test of this, so I won't go through the whole list, but I just want to make sure the board members in particular can hear and we can hear them. So if I call out your name, if you could just please take yourself off mute and confirm that you can hear and that we can hear you. So board member Holmes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. And board member Lunge.
Good morning.
Good morning. Board member Merman.
Hear that?
Yep. I can hear you now. Could you?
Just saying good morning.
Oh, good morning. And board member Walsh.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. So does everyone have their cameras on? I'm gonna need to take a second to just pin people because there's a lot of folks on the call. Okay, I see you now. Okay, if anybody has any technical difficulties as we go forward today, you can please just text me and let me know, and I'll pause the hearing while we try to get that sorted out. So my cell phone number is 802-585-4829. For any members of the public who are present today, we will be taking public comment at the close of the proceedings. I can't exactly say when that will be, and if you don't want to kind of wait around and sit through a long day of witness testimony, we are having a meeting later this week on Thursday, July 25th, from 4 to 5 in the afternoon, and that will be dedicated exclusively to hearing from the public on both these rate filings and the individual and small group rate filings from MVP. So information about that meeting can be found on the board's website by clicking on the link for the 2024 board meeting information. Or you could also go to the Department of Libraries homepage, and they have a calendar with all the upcoming meetings for all state agencies, and you can find information that way too. So I think we're ready to move on to the exhibit binders. So we received binders from Blue Cross on July 18th. It looks like all the documents that contain confidential information have been identified in the exhibit list. The confidential information that is in these documents is, I believe, marked with blue highlighting. Michael or Bridget, is there anything else you want to say about how confidential information is identified in the exhibits?
Nope, I think that's exactly right.
Okay, thanks. My understanding is that exhibits 1 through 22 are documents that have been stipulated to by the parties, while exhibits 23 and 24 are lists of documents that have been stipulated to by the parties, with the actual documents themselves not being in the binders. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And then the exhibit list shows an exhibit 25, but I don't see a document at tab 25 of my binder. Is this a placeholder for something?
Yes, that's a placeholder. I believe in the past there have been occasions where the board has asked for something to be placed into the binder, so we just left a placeholder just in case.
Okay. And then we received an exhibit 26 via email on Friday, July 19th, which we did share with the board members. Has the healthcare advocate stipulated to the admissibility of that document?
Yes.
So does everybody have all of those documents? So it would be 1 through 24 and a 26.
Yes, thank you.
Board members, do you all have that in front of you? And does anybody not have any of those documents? Okay.
On exhibit 26, I'd just like to thank Mr. Schulteis and Mr. Becker for working over the weekend and being in touch to secure that stipulation.
Okay. So does either party have any objection to me admitting exhibits 1 through 26 into evidence at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay, and please consider that done. The last item I wanted to check off was, I know board members and the parties are kind of old hats at this by now, but please save any questions you may have about confidential information for an executive or non-public session. We have planned for at least one, possibly two of those today. The schedule that we had discussed at the pre-hearing conference was that we would hear from Ruth Green first, and then Jesse Lucier and Commissioner Kevin Gaffney from the Department of Financial Regulation, and then Dr. Tom Weigel. And then we would have an executive session to allow for some direct and cross on confidential topics, particularly, I think, around prospective solvency assessments and provider contracting, other ones potentially. And then we would hear from Martine Lemieux, and then Kevin Ruggerberg, and then Mike Fisher, with a possible executive session prior to Mr. Fisher's testimony, if that's needed. So that's the schedule. That's obviously a lot to get through today. So I'm gonna try to keep us on track and be mindful of that. And if you could be as well, I think that would be helpful. And if I end up making a suggestion to kind of speed things along, please don't take offense. It's just a lot to get through. So does either party or any of the board members, do you have anything that we need to discuss before we move to opening statements?
Nothing from us.
No, thank you.
Okay, would Blue Cross like to make an opening statement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. Good morning, Chair Foster and board members. Good morning, Mr. Barber, Mr. Schulteis, Mr. Fisher, and the HCA team. I'm Mike D'Onofrio. I'm here with my colleague Bridget Acey from the law firm of Strisson Maher, representing Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont. So, like I said at this time last year, on behalf of the Blue Cross team, we all appreciate and take really seriously the inherent difficulty of the board's job in doing rate review. You have to balance the interdependent statutory factors, including whether the proposed rates are affordable, whether they promote high quality care, and whether they support robust access to that care. And as an aside, I just want to clarify that when I say proposed rates, I mean not the originally filed rates, but the rates as shown in Ms. Lemieux's supplemental pre-filed testimony. So kind of like our current, most operative version of the rates. So at the same time, you have to consider that kind of three-legged stool. You also have to make sure the rates are adequate and not excessive, and that they protect the insurer's solvency. I also said to you last year that I wished we could offer you an easy pathway through that thicket. And like last year, I'm sorry to say that we can't. In that vein, I think that this year presents perhaps the most challenging set of circumstances that this group collectively has faced in the 11 years you've been reviewing Blue Cross's rates. That follows from two hard realities. First, Vermont's healthcare costs continue to grow at an unsustainable rate. That's clear and undisputed from evidence in the record, including the filings themselves, the information that we've provided in response to questions from the board and the HCA, the pre-filed testimony we've submitted, the live testimony you'll hear today, and L&E's, that's Lewis and Ellis's evaluations of Blue Cross's rate development. Second, Blue Cross's solvency is in kind of an unprecedented and perilous state as we come into the hearing. The 2023 year-end RBC ratio of 337%, a historic low over the lifespan of this proceeding dating back to 2014, sounded initial alarm bells. And since then, the situation has gotten worse, thanks to significantly higher than projected 2024 claims. This fact is also clear and undisputed in the record based on Ms. Green's pre-filed testimony, Again, our responses to board and HCA questions, and most importantly, the Department of Financial Regulations solvency analyses of the two filings. In fact, DFR, who is Blue Cross's solvency regulator, has noted that Blue Cross's RBC has crossed the statutory threshold requiring Blue Cross to develop and provide a plan to DFR to improve its RBC level under 8 VSA 8308. And DFR's recommendation, which you'll find in the binder at exhibits 16 and 17, it amplifies the need this year to grow and not further deplete Blue Cross's reserves going forward. And I want to just read a bit of the recommendation. So beginning the quote here, DFR's overall solvency assessment of Blue Cross finds that the original proposed CTR, and therefore the rate, is insufficient and must be significantly adjusted upward. Blue Cross has indicated to the department the company will be adjusting the CTR factor from 3% to 7%. The department supports this increased CTR and finds it necessary to increase and stabilize reserves of Blue Cross. Any downward adjustments to the filing's other rate components that are not actuarially supported may prevent Blue Cross from meeting the necessary CTR and will further reduce Blue Cross's surplus and negatively impact its solvency. Close the quote. So in terms of a roadmap of the hearing, Blue Cross will offer testimony from 3 witnesses today. First, you'll hear from Ruth Green, Blue Cross's chief financial officer. She'll detail the very serious, dire solvency situation the company's facing and is prepared to testify generally about the company's finances. After Ms. Green, we'll hear from DFR, and then Dr. Thomas Weigel, Blue Cross's chief medical officer, will take the stand. He's prepared to discuss Blue Cross's efforts to do what it can to keep the rates as affordable as possible, in spite of the gale force headwinds I discussed a moment ago. And then finally, Martine Brisson-Lemieux, Blue Cross's chief actuary, will testify about the actuarial development of the rates, which, as I mentioned above, is not in dispute this year. Lewis and Ellis and Blue Cross essentially agree on the actuarial analysis and rate development. So I want to sum up with 2 thoughts. First, Blue Cross's solvency situation is the result of many factors accumulating over time. Healthcare costs that grow faster than anyone anticipates, the behavior of financial markets, underfunding of the rates over time in these markets, as depicted on the table on page 6 of Exhibit 1, the actuarial memo, and then unforeseen strains on the system like the COVID-19 pandemic. The list reminds me that when I was working for the board back in the early days of rate review, in one of the early rate hearings, Blue Cross explained that the reason why insurance companies have reserves is to make sure that the insurer can always fulfill its obligations to its members, whatever happens in the face of external events like financial upheaval or pandemics or what have you. And that comment, that memory rings prophetic in kind of an eerie way today. So in any event, this year, the board, in an unprecedented way, must approve rates that it believes will add to and grow Blue Cross's reserves in light of the solvency situation. Second, Blue Cross understands that many of our members are already struggling to pay the rates, and that these proposed rates just intensify those struggles. We've read the public comments that the board shared with us on Friday, and they speak a powerful message, and we understand that. We understand that painful reality. I think we've all asked ourselves throughout this whole process, how can we say these rates are affordable? One of the criteria that you have to evaluate in the face of this reality and these voices. And I'd offer up to you that it's the reason why we can is that in this context, in the context of reviewing health insurance rates, affordable has to mean something like as affordable as possible, given the unavoidable obligation to cover members' projected healthcare costs. So as painful as we know it will be for many of our members, we have no choice but to propose rates that we believe will cover those projected healthcare costs which are already high and which we know will continue to grow. In light of our extremely challenging solvency situation, we have no choice but to propose rates that will also shore up our financial footing so that we can continue to serve Vermonters in these markets. So last year at the end of my opening, I said something like this. If you reduce Blue Cross's proposed rates, but underlying costs and utilization grow as projected, and this year, as the evidence strongly supports they likely will, Blue Cross will sustain another loss in this market at a time when its solvency position needs to be prospectively maintained and not taxed. And unfortunately, that's where we're at. Blue Cross did sustain further losses in these markets in calendar year 2023, and calendar year 2024 appears to be following suit. So in light of the above and in light of the testimony that you'll hear today, we respectfully request that you approve the proposed rates, which will allow Blue Cross to continue to work with you, the HCA, other shareholders, stakeholders across the system to make Vermont's healthcare system more sustainable over time. Thank you for your team's energy and attention during today's hearing throughout this entire process, and we look forward to the conversation with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. D'Onofrio. Mr. Schulteis, would you like to make an opening statement?
I would. So good morning, all. Good morning, board members, Chair Foster, Blue Cross Blue Shield. My name is Eric Schulteis, and I'm a staff attorney with the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. I want to recognize, like Mr. D'Onofrio, that this year presents unique challenges. There is a real concern for Blue Cross's solvency. We are also staring down the impending expiration of enhanced premium tax credits, which means there will likely be a huge financial cliff for many Vermonters in 2026. Amidst these unique challenges, a few things, unfortunately, remain the same. The small group market is not supported by federal or state subsidies, meaning that the full burden of premiums and deductibles falls on small businesses and their employees. In the individual market, even with enhanced subsidies, far too many Vermonters struggle to afford health insurance, let alone use it. Our office has looked at the 2025 rates every possible way we can think of. It pains me to say that this year we believe that Blue Cross will need a substantial rate increase to ensure it can continue to provide Vermonters with health insurance. Make no mistake, our neighbors and local businesses cannot afford this large increase. More people will not be able to afford to use insurance, even if they buy it. Many of our neighbors' lives will be ruined by incurring more medical debt. We believe we are choosing between two horrible things: risk causing Blue Cross to become insolvent and force Vermonters to lose their coverage in the future, or make Vermonters' insurance costs even more affordable today. In other words, the board is forced to choose not whether Vermonters will suffer, but when they will suffer. The choice before you today makes one thing painfully clear. The system does not work for Vermonters. There are three immediate steps the board could take to make this system incrementally better for Vermonters. These steps will not solve our problems. These three steps will not change the horrible choice Blue Cross and the hospitals have forced upon you. These steps will, however, at least move us in the right direction. First, Blue Cross needs to take more accountability for organizational reform to reduce costs and improve efficiencies. It is easy to diffuse responsibility and blame problems on the board, or simply to say it is trying hard enough. It is harder to evaluate your own organization and recognize the need to improve. Vermonters deserve that Blue Cross stop finger pointing, stop saying it is doing everything it can, and look hard at what it can do better. Second, The board needs to finish its efforts to implement a definition of affordability that encompasses the dual burden of premiums and deductibles. Affordability is not mere cost reduction efforts by carriers. It must reflect affordability for Vermonters as mandated by rule and statute. The effort to define affordability must be revisited, and this effort must lead to a definition. Third, the board needs to regulate the entire cost equation. We know that medical unit costs are a major driver of premium increases, yet the disparity in regulation between carriers and hospitals is glaring. While carrier rates are set in stone, hospitals often exceed approved budgets without repercussion. Further, revenue overages are frequently just baked into the next budget submission, thus perpetuating cost overruns into the future. To make matters even worse, hospitals shirk their duty to look inwards when it comes to managing costs. Instead, we regularly hear from hospitals that Medicaid reimbursement rates are supposedly too low in Vermont, and thus the high commercial charges are justified. However, Vermont has the highest Medicaid reimbursement rate in New England and one of the highest in the nation. Public payer reimbursement is not the reason for the high commercial charges of most Vermont hospitals. It is not a debate, just like climate change is not a debate. The evidence only supports one side. For the sake of Vermonters, this absurd excuse for high prices cannot continue, and hospitals must be held to account by the board for its ordered charge increases. Before I summarize our position, I want to be completely clear. We are placed in today's position not because of past board actions or because of something Vermonters did. We are here because of the actions of regulated entities. You will undoubtedly hear from the regulated entities why someone else is to blame for what is happening. Please remember that the only people who lose in the endless game of finger pointing between hospitals and insurers are Vermonters. In summary, as we navigate Blue Cross's extreme 2025 rate proposal, a balanced approach is essential, one that addresses solvency and attempts to mediate our neighbors' suffering today. Blue Cross must stop finger pointing and look inward. The board must renew its efforts to establish an affordability standard, ensuring that the lived experience of Vermonters have a voice in our regulatory decisions. Lastly, the current system of regulation must be changed so that it effectively controls medical cost growth. Vermonters' health and pain are worth far more than these things. We can, including myself, must do better and must do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schulteis. So Blue Cross can now call its first witness.
Thank you. Good morning, Hearing Officer Barber, Chair Foster, board members, and HCA Council. I'm Bridget Acey, also here on behalf of Blue Cross, and we call Ruth Green as our first witness.
Okay, Ms. Green, are you ready to take the oath?
I am.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give relative to the cause now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Acey.
Would you please state your full name for the record?
Ruth Green.
Ms. Green, what is your position with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont?
I am the Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer of Blue Cross Vermont.
Did you submit pre-filed testimony in this matter?
Yes, I did.
And can you identify that, please, by exhibit number?
My pre-filed testimony is Exhibit 19 in the binder.
Is the testimony contained in Exhibit 19 true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
It is.
Ms. Green, you've testified at the board's rate review hearings now every year for a decade, right?
I have.
How is this year different?
I cannot overstate the seriousness of the financial challenges that Blue Cross is facing today. Our member reserves are at a historic low. RBC is far below the range required by the Department of Financial Regulation and trending downward. The critical need to protect our solvency is the main issue presented at the hearing. We understand that we're asking for a large increase on premiums that are already high. The fact is, paying for the health care for our members is getting more and more expensive. The approved premiums in these markets haven't kept pace with the cost of health care for our members. And the math is simple. Losses are paid out of reserves. Reserves are finite and shrinking. And we can barely manage the losses that we're experiencing in 2024, and this cannot be repeated in 2025. We don't make this request lightly. To continue serving these markets and avoid a full-blown solvency crisis, we have to have fully funded rates with a 7% contribution to reserve.
You mentioned RBC, and let's start there. What is the RBC range that the Department of Financial Regulation requires for Blue Cross Vermont?
The RBC range required is 590 to 745.
And I just want to pause here, Hearing Officer Barber, and just preview for the board and HCA Council. Ms. Green will testify in the public session regarding reserves and RBC position for year-end 2023. Consistent with the board's confidentiality rulings on our filings, we will reserve discussion of interim RBC and projections for an executive session, and I'll address that further at the end of the direct testimony. Ms. Green, what was Blue Cross Vermont's RBC position at the end of 2023?
At the end of 2023, it was 337.
And how much did Blue Cross hold in reserves at the end of 2023?
$88 million.
How would you describe Blue Cross's financial position and outlook at the end of 2023?
Our financial position at the end of 2023 was highly concerning.
How so?
Both our member reserves and RBC had dropped to 337, which is very, very low. In 2022, we had experienced significant losses that brought the RBC down to 434. Then, as we went into and completed 2023, the losses continued and were even higher due to higher claims than what we had predicted. And that was what pushed RBC down to 337. We were talking with the Department of Financial Regulation ever since really our RBC dropped below the bottom end of the target range. So we've been providing them with regular updates on the current situation.
As Blue Cross's treasurer and CFO, what kinds of concerns were in your mind when you were assessing the company's financial position at the end of 2023?
I really had two concerns. The first and foremost is focusing on a plan to make sure that we had fully funded rates and able to bring our RBC towards the target range, or at least make significant movement towards the target range. But also top of mind with an RBC of 337 is just the lack of flexibility and how we've talked before about the need for insurance companies to have adequate reserves to weather unexpected events and things that are out of the company's control, and still being able to pay claims in the face of those unexpected events. So starting the year with reserves at such a low point really was very concerning. In addition to our focus on recovery of RBC, it was very clear that our capacity for growth was also very limited, in fact, down to zero.
With that backdrop in mind, how has the first half of 2024 played out for Blue Cross?
The first half of 2024 got significantly worse. We have, as I included in my pre-filed testimony, we had claims surges in April and May that really tested our ability to keep paying those claims, and also caused concern given that it really is important for the premiums to cover the claims, so we are continuing to pay out of reserve.
Did you provide details about the claim surge in your pre-filed testimony?
Yes, I did.
Is there anything you want to highlight for the board from that testimony?
Yeah, there was two things that I'll note here, and that first is the surge that we saw in April and May really was focused in the medical facility claims, notably not the pharmacy or prescription drug claims. This means that the latest surge is coming from the providers that are regulated by the board. The second thing I'd like to point out, and if we could go to page 11 of Exhibit 19, there's a table on that page that shows the increase in per member per month medical claims from 22 to 2024. It's the second table at the top of that, from the top of that page. These increases are way higher and faster than what we had included in claims, and if the contribution to reserves had been fully funded over a number of years, we might be able to sustain such a significant increase as shown there. But we really can't absorb this at this point given the low level of member reserves.
So just staying on that chart, have Blue Cross's rates been growing at the same pace as those claims expenses?
No, they have not.
Is it fair to plain English, describe Blue Cross's reserves as a cushion?
Yes, it's fair to describe that, although with reserves at such a low level, there is no cushion left. That has been clear since the end of last year.
Ms. Green, you testified both here a few moments ago and in your pre-filed testimony that Blue Cross Vermont is requesting a 7% contribution to reserves for these markets. Is that a change from the request made in the original rate filing?
Yes, it is.
And what was the original request?
The original request in the rate filing was 3% CTR.
Can you please briefly explain the context for making that request in the original filing?
Sure. At the time of the filing, we had only preliminary 2024 results. As you know, the claims are not made and processed instantaneously, so it takes a little bit of time to understand how the early part of the year is developing. I can provide more details in executive session, but around RBC levels since the beginning of the year. But at the end of, or at the time of the rate filing, the first quarter or the first 3 months of the year were a little bit high, but not significantly so in terms of claims. And we were still projecting RBC at the end of 2024 to be a modest increase over the end of 2023. We also knew that the rate increase proposed for 2025 was very high. This is a result of the escalating and continuing increases in the medical costs and the healthcare costs of our members. We knew that it would be very difficult to increase CTR on top of already high increases. We did discuss the idea of increasing CTR to 5%, and I feel we could have made a justification for that, but at the time we were very reluctant to add to the already high increases.
What changed after the rate filing in May?
Again, I can discuss projected RBC figures in executive session, but I can say that the April and May underwriting results were very, very unfavorable to our expectations, and our financial picture got significantly worse. As April claims came in, we started to become concerned, and then when May claims came in June, we definitely felt that some action is required. Our RBC continued to trend downward.
Is Blue Cross now requesting a 7% CTR in the individual and small group markets?
Yes, we urgently need the board to approve fully funded rates, including a 7% CTR.
And is that request prompted by the reserve position?
Yes.
Ms. Green, can you clarify what you mean when you say that the rate needs to be fully funded?
Yes, I outlined this in my pre-filed testimony on page 8 of Exhibit 19. That bottom of the page, we can only achieve our target CTR if all components of the rates are adequately funded. If the board reduces other components of the filed rate, those reductions are effectively reductions to CTR. So when I say fully funded rates, I mean that the assumptions need to hold and also include a appropriate, sufficient CTR.
Has Blue Cross been consulting with the Department of Financial Regulation as you've been assessing these developments?
Yes, we have. As soon as the April and May results began to emerge, we reached out and in touch with DFR on the most recent developments. We had been in touch with them regularly, but this was unexpected, and we also shared with them our plans for bringing RBC back into the target range.
What is that plan?
The overriding priority for moving RBC for Blue Cross back towards and into the required range is to have fully funded premiums, including a sufficient CTR that has to be significant enough to move RBC to the minimally adequately funded level.
Ms. Green, have you read DFR solvency letter in this proceeding, which is at Exhibits 16 and 17 in the binder?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any reaction to the DFR letter to share with the board?
Yeah, I'd like to point out several items. In fact, on the first page, they say that Blue Cross is facing extraordinary circumstances, and they explain that with the recent drop in RBC that has triggered a statutory action level. So we are required by law to take steps to stabilize our situation. DFR on the next page also agrees that the 3% CTR is inadequate as filed. The commissioner explains on page 2, quote, that quote, an increase in the contribution to reserves is necessary to increase the company's surplus toward acceptable levels for the protection of policyholders. They go on to show how the CTR for this book of business or these markets has been underfunded in recent years, significantly underfunded. And in plain English, that means that those losses on page 3 have been paid out of reserves instead of premiums. And then the bottom line is that the DFR letter also expresses that they agree with our request for 7% CTR. On page 4, there's a quote that talks about our request for 7%, and it says that the department, quote, finds it necessary to increase and stabilize reserves of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont. So this is our solvency regulator, and they stated publicly in their letter that we have to take action to stabilize our situation, and as a result of our RBC falling in 2024, we do have statutory action event in place. And they are saying that this is what we need to do, and I don't think it can be any clearer than that.
Ms. Green, are you prepared to provide additional testimony and answer questions regarding Blue Cross's interim RBC calculations and RBC projections for 2024 and 25?
Yes.
Is it appropriate to provide that testimony in a public session?
No, it is not.
And why not?
Our financial projections are confidential, commercially sensitive information that provide a business advantage to Blue Cross. We make reasonable efforts to maintain the confidentiality of our financial projections, and doing so is important in a competitive environment. Our financial projections also include items that relate to confidential contract negotiations, and the same is true for interim mid-year RBC calculations. They are not final numbers, and we do not typically share those calculations publicly, and they are confidential, commercially sensitive information.
In your pre-filed testimony, you outlined some other actions in addition to the rate request here that Blue Cross is taking as part of its recovery plan. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And those are at pages 14 to 15 of Exhibit 19?
Yes.
Are some of those actions also confidential?
Yes. As we explained in our confidentiality request, some of those actions are not public, and disclosing them now would disclose confidential, commercially sensitive information that provides a business advantage to Blue Cross. I can discuss further in executive session if the board has questions.
So with respect to the actions that can be discussed publicly, is there anything that you would like to highlight for the board?
Yeah, I think the main point, and we'll keep coming back to this, is the main driver of adequate reserves is fully funded rates, including a sufficient contribution to reserves. There really are no levers as significant as that. There are other things we can do, and they all do contribute, but they really are not, they pale in comparison to ensuring that premiums are adequate, including sufficient contribution to reserves.
Are you taking any steps regarding administrative costs?
Yes, and I take the comments by the HCA that we have, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont has been working to be more and more efficient and effective at what we do. L&E for years has pointed out that our administrative cost structure is very low by national standards, especially for a small Blue plan. Beginning last year, in the middle of the year, when our RBC dropped below 400%, we took further steps to limit any discretionary spend as you would expect we would do under the circumstances. But we can't stop processing claims or supporting our members or communicating with providers and implementing our, for example, fraud, waste, and abuse programs and meeting regulatory requirements. This is the core of what we have to continue to do. So there's really no way to, as an example, there's no way to sustainably reduce administrative costs that would be significant enough to, in the long run, repair the RBC, but it is important and it does contribute, so we do remain focused on it. The cost of care for our members is the main driver of the reserve recovery, and we have to have premium rates, including a sufficient CTR, that cover that cost.
So turning then to the rates in these markets, have those rates historically provided an adequate CTR?
No, they have not.
I'd like to direct you to Exhibit 1, page 6, which is page 6 of the actuarial memorandum.
And there?
Do the charts on page 6 of Exhibit 1 show the historical experience in the QHP market?
Yes.
Is there a chart that's similar to the first chart on page 6 of Exhibit 1 that's found in Exhibit 13 on page 5?
Yes, the exhibit in Exhibit 13 corrects an error, but the bottom line on that table is the same.
And what is the bottom line?
The bottom line is stark. You can see that since the inception of these markets, we've had a cumulative loss, and that loss is noted in the paragraph below. The total loss in these markets cumulatively is $40.4 million. So that $40.4 million has come out of member reserves.
What were the losses in these markets in 2022 and 2023? And if you could point to the chart, the relevant chart as well.
Sure. The second chart on page 6 of Exhibit 1 on the far right shows the gains and losses for each year, and the cumulative total is $40 million. In 2022, the loss was just over $50 million, and in 2023, the loss was almost $33 million.
Has Blue Cross achieved an adequate CTR in these markets?
No, as you can see from this exhibit, we have not collected anything close to an adequate contribution to reserve in our premiums to support these markets. Over the decade that we've been participating in the markets, you can see we've filed contribution to reserves in as low as 1%. For many years, it was 1.5%, and until last year, not higher than 2%. Our targets have been reasonable and low by national standards. That's the comparisons that LNE has done over the years. But in almost every year, the board has either cut CTR explicitly or has made reductions to other assumptions within the rates that were not actuarially supported. So that amounts to the same thing in terms of a reduction to CTR. And we show the comparison of those results in that same table. So as a result, over the last decade, instead of having these markets modestly add to reserves, these markets have actually lost significant, we've had significant losses that have drained reserves. So in plain English, it means that we've paid that out of reserves instead of out of premiums.
Is the cumulative historical CTR then negative in these markets?
Yes, the cumulative actual CTR is negative 1.7. And if you compare the negative rate of 1.7. If you compare that to the filed contribution to reserve that should have been supported at 1.6, that gap is huge. If you run the calculations, it's about just under 300 points of RBC.
How, you've spoken several times this morning about increasing claims costs. How do increasing claims costs affect Blue Cross's RBC?
Increasing claims costs really is the main driver of the financial challenges that we've had because it directly reduces the reserves. When we have a loss that's not supported by premiums, that comes out of reserves. And so I'll describe it as in the numerator, if you will, of the RBC, it just reduces the reserves.
Are there other ways that increasing claims costs affect the RBC level?
Yeah, the other significant impact for increasing claims is when claims are increasing, it increases the authorized control level or the ACL. This is the denominator of the RBC calculation, and that authorized control level is a reflection of the risk that we have as an insurance company. And as claims go up, that calculation also increases. So the denominator grows, and even if reserves in the numerator stayed the same, RBC would go down. When claims go up at a significant pace, there's an inflationary effect, which just means that you need a higher CTR just merely because claims are increasing quickly.
Are there other factors that have contributed to the change in RBC?
Yes, there are.
I want to point you to what's been marked as Exhibit 26. And Exhibit 26, just as a reminder for the board, was admitted this morning but is not in the binder. It's a one-page document.
Yeah.
What is Exhibit 26?
Exhibit 26 is a chart that we provided to the board after hearing last year that decomposes the historical changes in surplus over the years, and we updated that to include 2023.
Would you please summarize for the board what Exhibit 26 shows?
Sure. There's a number of things I'd like to point out on Exhibit 26. First, I would draw the board's attention to the RBC history. You can see that it has been volatile in recent years due to both the factors impacting the surplus or member reserves in the numerator as well as the ACL. So that's both shown there. The most significant factor driving these changes in surplus is coming back up to the top line of the exhibit, the underwriting gain or loss has to, that's the line item where we have to see it supporting a modest contribution to reserve. And as you can see, the losses there have been significant, especially in 22 and 23. The other factors impacting surplus, things that we've talked about in past years, we had the COVID pandemic, which temporarily slowed claims payments in 2020, and then when the payments came back in 2021, 2, and 3, all of that was run through reserves. We did not put any of that in our premiums. That's what reserves are for, to cushion the impact of those unexpected items. And then there's a series of other items on this exhibit. The equity gains and losses will go up and down from time to time, but overall, they will cumulatively add to reserves. We have the equity investment in our Vermont Blue Advantage Medicare Advantage business We launched that business as COVID was getting underway, and that business has also suffered in terms of high claims in the last 2 years as the medical cost trend has escalated. And then there's the tax law changes. And anyone who's been through these hearings for all of these years, like I have, we had large changes in the tax code, and that came through beginning in 2017, and then also added to reserves in 2019 and 2021. And then, of course, we've got the pension losses and subsequent recovery of the losses where we were defrauded by investment managers, and we recovered a majority of that through litigation, and also was a catalyst for us freezing our pension. So the last thing I'll point out on this exhibit is the ACL that I mentioned earlier. You can see that on the line second from the bottom, and that has grown in the last couple of years significantly, and that is both as a result of membership growth, but also the claims cost supported by that membership growth has grown tremendously, as I mentioned a moment ago.
In your opinion, Ms. Green, does the fact that the other factors you've talked about impact RBC, does that fact undermine Blue Cross's request for a 7% PTR in 2025?
No, it doesn't.
Would you please explain why not?
The first thing I'd like to say is that I think we need to put the frame on this conversation. In past proceedings, we've talked about the other factors impacting RBC and whether or not that should be attributed or not to the QHP market. But if we flip the frame and say that instead of thinking of contribution to reserves or CTR as a problematic add-on to rates, we really should be thinking about it as a critical part to any rate, and it really is not an optional item, and it's really required in order to sustain reserves over time. Because of that, I really don't think it's appropriate to look at the various things affecting reserves in total and attribute much of that to the QHP marketplace. The QHP marketplace has to have premiums that sustain and cover the cost of healthcare, the cost of insurance, and include a appropriate CTR to sustain reserves. The reserves are needed to support the entire Blue Cross enterprise, and we serve a lot of different market segments, and all of those market segments will go through various stages, and so reserves do have to sustain us through the natural ebb and flow of business results across the entire enterprise. In fact, if you silo reserves, if you think of member reserves in a siloed fashion, you can make an argument that we wouldn't be in these markets at all, because the reserves required to grow the business would have to be there in order for us to serve new members. So if we were attributing the reserves just to one market at a time, we would not be able to grow the business at all.
Are there other reasons that justify a 7% CTR in these markets specifically?
Yes, there are. I can elaborate a little bit more on this in executive session, but the QHP markets serve to require us to have a disproportionate share of the reserve requirements. So these markets have a relatively high risk profile, and it really drives disproportionate share. And even if you were to focus solely on these markets, the 7% is justified because we have such an overwhelming, obvious picture that these markets have contributed to the current financial problems. The difference, as I said earlier, between the minus 7% cumulative CTR and the fact that it should have been providing a modest cumulative 1.5% CTR really is significant.
I just want to clarify one thing you just said, that the cumulative negative CTR, again, was a stupid number. I think
Yeah.
it came out.
The cumulative negative CTR of 1.7 that we saw in Exhibit 1.
In the board's decision last year, the board reduced Blue Cross's 3% CTR request to 2%, saying in part that the ratepayers in these markets, quote, should not bear a disproportionate burden. In your view, have the ratepayers in these markets borne a disproportionate burden in contributing to Blue Cross's reserve?
No, to the contrary. As I explained, these markets have been draining our reserves rather than supporting them. We've explained for a number of years that premium reductions that aren't justified actuarially don't save money. They just push costs onto future years. And we are at a place where we cannot sustain that outcome anymore. Even if you think about the last couple of years with the large losses and the increase in federal subsidies, the decisions made to reduce contribution to reserves or rate assumptions, thinking that that was going to save money. In fact, all that did was push losses onto Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont's reserves and without even benefiting the individuals that have the subsidies. So I'd like to just sum up the picture to say that we're just at a point where we can't sustain this anymore. To protect our solvency, we need fully funded rates in order to continue to serve Vermonters across all lines of business.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Hearing Officer Barber, that concludes the public session portion of Ruth Green's testimony for today. We do have additional testimony that we would like to proffer in executive session. I believe that Ms. Green gave a factual basis for doing so during her testimony. And if you'd like me to address that further now or later, I'm happy to do that. But otherwise, we have no further questions in the public session at this time.
Okay. I think now would be a good time to take just a 5-minute break. And then we'll come back at 9:20 and move on to HCA Cross. Okay.
Mike, would you mind if we make it 10 actually?
Sure. Yeah. We'll see everyone at 9:25 then.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now going off the record. The time is 9:15 a.m.
Thank you. Susanna, are you with us?
Oh, I'm sorry. My my mic was muted. Yes, I'm here. I apologize. You ready to go back on the record?
Yeah, let's go back on the record, please.
Okay, we're going back on the record. The time is 9:26 a.m.
Thank you. So we just finished the non-confidential direct of Ruth Green and turn it over to Mr. Schulteis for any questions he may have.
Thank you. Hi, Ms. Green.
Good morning.
So just to kind of set the stage, I'm going to ask you first about a few questions about the dynamic between health insurance premiums and hospital allowed charge increases. I want to try to avoid, if we can, eliciting confidential information. I trust you and or your counsel will speak up if we should be talking about anything in closed session. I'm also going to ask you about filed 2025 CTR and other BCBS-VT books of business. Lastly, just to note, when I'm directing you to pages, I'm referring to the red pages, red page numbers printed on the bottom of the page. So could you turn to Exhibit 19, page 14? So Exhibit 19 is your pre-filed testimony. Let me know when you are there.
Page 14, I'm there.
Okay. Do you see the question on line 5, which is about what Blue Cross is doing to approve its solvency position?
Yeah.
Okay, and if you go over to page 15, which should just be across in the binder, do you see that list of bullets? And it's, I think, though, the second bullet, which is about seeking relief from hospitals that exceeded their ordered commercial rate.
Yes, I see that.
Okay, so my first few questions are aimed at putting an idea to rest. So I apologize in advance to you and the board if I'm treading over ground that is too worn. So do board ordered hospital commercial charge increases impact health insurance rates?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember that in previous years we've heard that ordered hospital charge increases should act as a ceiling?
Yes, I remember that.
Yep. So in reality, do ordered hospital charge amounts act as a ceiling?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? Does it currently?
Sure, Ms. Green. So in reality, do board-ordered hospital charge increases act as a ceiling?
Yes and no. They do act as a ceiling during negotiating and contracting as we go into a year. And I guess I would say no, in the sense that we have to monitor after the fact if the mix of services and activities at the hospitals change significantly from the assumptions going into the contract agreement, and sometimes they do change. So there is just a natural part of the process of implementing rate increases that sometimes causes things to be higher or lower than what was expected going in.
So the ordered rates like start as a ceiling and you guys negotiate materially different rates, or is it just like 0.1% here or there?
Yeah, in reality, it's not a lot different than the ordered rates. Dr. Weigel can testify some more about the details here, but broadly speaking, for many years, the decisions made in the hospital budget arena are very difficult for us to negotiate anything below that.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. So I'm going to shift to the mechanics of the regulatory processes for rate review and hospital budgets now. So in rate review, the outcome of rate review is that you get an ordered premium increase and then you implement that ordered premium increase, right?
Correct.
Okay, so Blue Cross can't, for instance, because claims are coming in at a higher level than predicted, change the premium mid-year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so whatever the ordered premium rate is what the premium rate for the year is, regardless of what happens.
That's correct for these markets, yes.
So can hospitals go over the board-ordered commercial charge rate? Or the NPR, I guess?
Yeah, the implementation of hospital charges, all of the charges for services are unique and different, and not all of those charges, we've talked about this with the board in the past, that not all of those charges have applied the same unit cost increases, but the collection of those services through the modeling of the contracting teams, they sort of designed that implementation in a way that both parties believe at that time that it will achieve either the ordered rate or whatever small amount we've been able to negotiate under that rate.
So I'm guessing from your pre-file testimony that it actually did happen this year that a hospital went over, or at least one or more hospitals went over. Is that correct?
Yeah, we monitor the hospitals and how the contracts unfold with actual results, and we do that every year. We've been doing that for a number of years, and sometimes they go higher or lower. Post-COVID, it's been difficult to understand how the mix of services is sort of unfolding relative to where our typical history would tell us. But we have noticed that there's hospitals that, through the mix of services after the fact, have indeed gone over the rate commitment that they had to us. So we'll be following up with those hospitals.
So thinking back over the last, say, 7 years, have overages that also happened in the past?
Overages and underages have happened in the past, and usually in a modest order of magnitude.
So in the last 5 years, can you when that occurred, when there was an overage, can you remember when a hospital had a substantial consequence for its commercial charge overage that was board ordered?
I do not recall any.
Okay. So we're going to switch topics again. And so my last set of questions for you are about contribution to reserves by block of fully insured business. Has BCBS-VT amended its pending large group unit cost rate filing to change the contribution to reserves from 3% to 7%?
Yes, we have.
Okay. And have you done that, or has Blue Cross done that for association health plan filing, for the association health plan filing?
Yes, we've updated both the large group and the association health plan filings for both the 7% CTR and the changes that have come through in the QHP rate review related to H766 and the latest submitted hospital budget. So that those updates have been submitted.
And I know it's not board regulated, but is the VBA block of business, has the contribution to reserve been increased in that?
So I'm just going to caution that does go potentially into confidential territory. I think Ms. Green can navigate what she can say here, but.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start and then we can go a little deeper in executive session if we need to. The Medicare Advantage business also historically has targeted a 3% CTR, but the reality in that business is that we only entered that market in 2021. So there was a 5-year financial plan to get to a target CTR because of the cost of entering a new market and building to scale. Our business plan for entering that market planned for losses, but in the ongoing sort of when we get to run rate and break even, it will tend to target the same CTR as other lines of business. There is a bid process with CMS at the federal level that supports the Medicare Advantage business, and we can talk more about actions we've taken in that bid process under our current circumstances that are probably better for executive session.
So I'm not sure if this should be an executive session. I'm going to try it anyway, and you let me know if we should have it in executive session. So I think what you said, I think, was that you're going to target the same CTR, so 7%, that you do in other books of business, but that's not going to be next year. That's going to be sometime in the future, correct?
Right, that is fair to say. CMS had implemented a number of revenue changes for all Medicare plans nationwide. And when we had to submit a bid, we were unable to achieve the target that we aspire to, but we are definitely working towards that.
Great, thank you for clearing that up. So those are all my questions for Ms. Green, and kind of just like Mrs. Say did, I reserve the right to do additional cross-examination of the witness should we go into an executive session.
Okay. Ms. Beliveau, do you have any questions you'd like to ask Ms. Green?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to board members. The order will go Board Member Walsh, Merman, Lunge, Holmes, and then Chair Foster. So Board Member Walsh, do you have questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Ms. Green and Mr. Schulteis. Let me just gather my thoughts from notes for a second, please. I think I'd like to start with questions regarding the uptick in April and May of this year, the first half of 2024, claim surges in April and May. During your testimony, Ms. Green, you mentioned that a big driver of that was medical facilities, and I was hoping you might explain that a little bit further.
Sure, I'll comment and also acknowledge that Martine Lemieux is also very familiar with the claims information that we've presented, so she could answer further detailed questions if necessary. But the uptick in April and May, of course, when we experience a significant claims surge, especially this early in the year, our response was to immediately dive into that to see where the volumes and rates are coming from. Some of the oftentimes with a surge like that, we can see pharmacy drug costs going up, but this wasn't the case. It was sort of in line with our expectations. And then it was on the medical side and concentrated in facilities, which means the hospitals, and including the drugs that are administered in the hospitals. anecdotally, based on the data that we have been able to see so far, we've seen an uptick in some of the chemotherapies, which is, important life-saving treatments for patients, and also in some of the other types of specialty drugs that are administered in the hospital. So we're urgently following up on that information to understand what might be happening. But yeah, that is, again, kind of volume driven, if you will, and a lot of times with the hospital estimates that we do, we're making estimates for both the unit cost increases as well as the utilization increases. So those facilities activity was a major driver of the April and May surge.
So thank you for that. It sounds, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's both an increase in utilization and an increase in unit price.
Well, it's an increase in the utilization of the things that are higher cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oftentimes, I'm used to thinking about this as a combination of utilization, price, and diagnostic intensity. And have you seen any change in diagnostic intensity in 2024?
Yeah, that is a really good question. If I may, to have you talk with Martine Lemieux about. We typically fold utilization and intensity into the same assumption, and she can share what she has for information around 2024. We do know in the bigger picture, the health status of Vermonters has declined post-COVID, and we know that the more complex treatments and health conditions that members have, those are the high-cost treatments. So we have broadly, over the last few years, seen a shift towards those complex, but the April and May activity itself, whether or not that bigger trend is also acutely evidenced in the April and May results, we're still looking at that.
So unclear at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit more about medical trend more broadly. How many years make up the medical trend?
Can you say a little bit more about that? How many
Sure.
years in the rates, or how many years?
In your calculations for setting this year's rate requests, how many prior years are reviewed to create the medical trend?
Yes, again, Martine is absolutely a good person to talk to about this, what we've included in the rate filing. We look at the 2023 base year as experience, so anything that has been updated from last year's rates that have to do with the base year experience. And then we look at 2023 and 2020, how 2024 is running through, what the trend looks like, and add that into rates. And then we make a projection of what 2025 would look like. When Martine's selecting those rates of increases, medical trend for utilization, et cetera, she has a very disciplined and rigorous process for looking at a number of years. They might look at 5 years or 3 years, and they also incorporate anything that they have in their understanding of the experience that would help them understand if there was one-time effects that were affecting those rates. So a good example, well-known example, is the COVID disruption. It was hard to understand what quote, normal trends might look like with the disruption from COVID. We also had a major disruption in relatively recent history with the UVM Health Network cyber attack. So there's a number of things that the actuarial team look at and review in order to determine what the appropriate trend is. And then that is all reviewed, as you know, by the L&E actuary.
Mm-hmm. And so what I'm trying to understand, thinking of a trend, is the medical trend composed of a 5-year period, a 3-year period, a 10-year period?
The trend selection, as we call it, is informed by all of those views, and then the trend selection is determined based on, you know, the actuarial expertise of the data and the statistics behind it. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm avoiding questions, but I just want to make sure that there's a clear understanding that, you know, the medical trend is clearly part of the actuarial science behind the rate setting.
Right. And I don't feel like you're trying to avoid anything. I feel like you're trying to clarify, and it's helpful. The medical trend, as I mentioned a moment ago, I tend to think of as consisting of many components, but primarily utilization, price, and intensity. And I'm wondering if you could provide us with a sense of, you know, in the opening statement, it was said repeatedly that unit cost, or the price per unit, is the largest driver. But I'm wondering if you could be a little bit more concrete. What proportion of the medical trend is driven by price, utilization, and intensity?
Okay. If I go back to what I said at the beginning of my testimony, I think what I was intending to say was that the overall cost of paying for healthcare for our members is the overriding driver of premiums, as well as in recent years losses, because our premiums have not covered the cost of paying for healthcare. And to connect back to your question, that cost of healthcare, we make estimates for all of those pieces: the unit cost, the utilization, the intensity, the drug component, new specialty drugs coming on. So we make estimates around all of that, and they are just estimates. And I think the point I was making was that the overriding impact is when those estimates fall short. So our approved premiums were not adequate to cover the overall cost of healthcare. So, and all that includes all those pieces: the cost trend, utilization, and intensity.
Okay. All three components are increasing the cost of healthcare, which you then pay out, and the premiums have not kept pace with the ability to pay out. That's the point that I hear you trying to make. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to get a sense of, you know, we have in Vermont an access to healthcare problem. And so if we improved access, utilization may go up and it could be justified. Alternatively, prices may be rising, and that may be due to inflation or any number of factors that could drive price. Intensity could be that indeed Vermonters are sicker, or it could be using new software to make sure coding is accurately captures what's happening in hospitals. And what I'm trying to get a sense of from Blue Cross's perspective is one of those items driving healthcare costs any more than the other? Utilization, price, or intensity?
Yeah, I do think that it's all of the above. We had very high unit cost increases over the last couple of years. The budget guidance from the board for this year was 3.4%, and that's what we built into our submitted rates, and then we've updated that for what was submitted. So that price has been a driver. We know that utilization trend has gone up because more people are getting care, and that's a good thing. And to your point, it does need to be paid for. So it's also a driver of the increase. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I do think intensity is also part of the equation, and it's logical to think with all of those things happening that there's no surprise in some ways that suddenly we're seeing all of these factors come together with an acceleration of claims costs. And our approved premiums have to catch up with that.
Okay, thank you. Switching topics a bit, what proportion of the claims paid out by Blue Cross are submitted by entities regulated by the Green Mountain Care Board?
That statistic I would defer to Martine so that she gives you the accurate statistic. It's a very large portion of the healthcare costs as part of our rates, but she can give you the number.
Is Martine due to present to us?
Yes, she'll testify later on the detailed components of the rate filing. So she normally is up first, but this year we're doing something a little bit different. So she'll be happy to answer those questions when she testifies a bit later.
Okay. Great. In the electronic binder that came on Friday, using the page number that's the page numbering is difficult, but it's page 24, just the 24th page in the electronic binder. 54% of claims were from GMCB regulated entities, leaving 46% from unregulated entities.
On that page, can you scroll to the page number to the lower right that's in red, and that would tell me what exhibit and page you're on?
I'll try. Exhibit 1, page 23.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Third paragraph.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Sorry. This table, Ms. Lemieux includes this table regularly in the actuarial memorandum when we submit the rates. So yes, this is the Vermont facilities and providers impacted by the Green Mountain Care Board hospital budget review is 54%.
And in that same table at the bottom of that page, it appears that the cost trend is rising more rapidly among non-regulated entities. Am I reading that table correctly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have other questions, Tom?
I think I'm looking at my notes. The rest of my questions are for LNE and DFR.
Okay.
Okay.
And then
yeah.
Blue Cross's actuary will be testifying in the afternoon. So if you want to get some clarification on those questions you had, I think that'd be a good time to do that.
Great. All right. Thank you for your time. Thanks for answering the questions.
Thank you.
Okay, Board Member Merman, do you have questions for Ms. Green?
Yeah, and I'm sorry if you feel like these questions are more appropriate for somebody else, because because it kind of happened all.
Dave, you're breaking. We're having a.
Yeah, we can't hear you at all.
Do someone else and come back to me.
Oh, you're good now.
Weird.
Yeah, we can hear
Okay.
you there for a second.
All right, let's try this again.
Oh, we
Let
can
me
hear
know
you. Okay.
All right, great. So my questions are kind of jumbled together. So if you think they're more appropriate for someone else, would you please just direct me to that person? Because I don't know if I quite have these arranged, but I'll try to start with ones that are specific to your written testimony. And I can work with those. Okay. Second, sorry, I need a different pair of reading glasses to read this. So, okay. Actually, so I have a few that are in the L&E memo, but I think they're probably okay to discuss. In the L&E memo, Exhibit 12, page 8, there's a bunch of confidential information. I'm not going to address that here. Sorry, this is not the L&E memo. This is your response to the Green Mountain Care Board questions, Exhibit 12, page 8. There's this large chart of hospital relative cost. I'm just curious, there says Blue Cross Vermont internal monitoring. And I was curious, do you know the year that monitoring occurred? Because the RAND 5.0 data is from 2022.
Yeah, that is a question that I am unable to answer, but perhaps Dr. Weigel, who's testifying later, or Ms. Lemieux could potentially also.
Okay. On the next page, there's a paragraph at the end there that discusses the sort of concept that hospitals are allowed to increase their rates by the Green Mountain Care Board, and then the hospital can then adjust the charge master as they want, and then the relationship with the insurer is to adjust sort of discounts off of those charges. Am I understanding that process correctly there in the last paragraph?
Yes, certain hospitals, there are some hospitals that are different, but the ones that do have the charge master, that is describing how that works.
So the way I read that, to me, that implies that if a hospital wants to increase their prices on one particular item in that charge master above the board approved rate, they think they can do that if they can offset that with a lower price increase in a different service. Is that accurate?
That's true. And as I mentioned earlier in response to the HCA question, the contracting teams for both the hospital and Blue Cross look at the expectations for the mix of business, and to the best of everyone's ability, they make estimates as to what that mix will look like and how the mix and the changes among those services will, in the aggregate, come back to the ordered cost increase or the negotiated cost increase if it's slightly lower in a few rare cases.
Okay, let me back out a bit then. So last year, we were fairly specific, I think, in our orders.
Your audio is breaking up now again.
Yeah, we don't have clear audio on you, sir. Still not clear audio.
Try turning off your video, Dr.
Is there
Murray.
any difference there?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I passed the mic to a different mic. Okay, so let me know if it stops, and then I'll try my video if that doesn't work. Okay, so I was trying to say, let's backing up a little bit. Last year, the board was fairly specific in our orders that we were discussing a change in charge. In prior years, some hospitals used effective commercial rate. Does Blue Cross Blue Shield view those as different things, and if so, how?
Again, I think Dr. Wagle might be a good person to follow up with on this, but we spent some time last year in hearing talking in great detail about how the ordered hospital budgets by the board kind of flow into the rates. And so we are very much trying to go into each new year with an understanding of how the committed commercial rate will be implemented appropriately, consistent with our premium rate assumptions. Whether or not the terminology of effective rate or ordered rate, I don't know if that makes a difference. I personally don't have two different of those types of rates. It's sort of the Green Mountain Care Board approved rate is sort of how we think about it. But the Dr. Weigel, who testifies later, is closer to it and might be able to further elaborate.
I guess, so when you, when from the Blue Cross Blue Shield standpoint, when you read a Green Mountain Care Board budget order and you go into negotiations with a hospital, I guess, what is the definition of rate? Is it, yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
Yeah, it's the published approved commercial rate increase that the board
Okay,
publishes.
and rate is defined, by change in charge, change in reimbursement per unit, the amount paid by Blue Cross Blue Shield for the book of business for that specific health plan. What do you mean by published rate?
So the commercial cost increase is what we're focused on.
Okay.
And that is implemented in the way we were talking about. There's also, well, yeah, it's the published commercial unit cost rate.
Published commercial unit cost rate. And so, and what is a unit in that?
Well, unit cost as, so the aggregate of all the services that hospital is planning to provide in the coming contract year, the unit cost of all those aggregate services would be limited to that commercial unit cost rate increase.
Okay, so would it be fair to say if you had the same number of enrollees in a plan, say 20,000, and 23, and 20,000, and 24, and 20,000 FY25, that you would expect if the health of those people didn't change, so the services didn't change, would you expect if the unit cost, say if it went up by 10%, it would go from 22 to 23 would go from each year that group of people would cost 10% more to pay for at that hospital?
True, that in that example with all those assumptions, that's true.
Okay, so if, as Tom Walsh was saying, if the intensity of the services were to increase that to those patients, that would then not be would that be reflected in the board ordered rate change?
The intensity and the utilization tend to happen according to the healthcare needs of the population in the year. So, that's an assumption that the actuaries are, looking at all of the historical information and the current information to see what they think that increase would look like. So it's the unit cost trend and then an additional trend for utilization and intensity.
Okay, and my understanding from what I've read and what you just said to Tom Walsh is that utilization includes intensity in a sense. Is that so? And let me ask that question. Go ahead. Yeah.
So just when I say that, I just mean to say, in the way we develop rates, we're folding those two. We look at them, but when they're expressed in the actuarial memorandum, we put them together. They are different, clearly different assumptions. You can use more of the same, or you can use more intense services, and both things would affect rates.
Okay, so if a hospital or a group of hospitals or providers were to work diligently to try to improve their documentation integrity, is the term often used, which would then increase the intensity for the same services provided, but actually, documented appropriately so that reflects the services provided. Can Blue Cross Blue Shield monitor if that's occurring, and if so, how?
We don't have a lot of granularity to know what would have been coded previously. If there's been an effort, there is a lot of literature written about coding growth, and it comes into play often with our risk adjustment work. So we do have people who are studying the trends there, but it could be a dynamic that the intensity has always been there, but the coding's now reflecting it appropriately. That's a possibility as well. But I think the claim has to be paid, and the healthcare was provided, and the costs have to be covered by premiums.
Yeah, I agree. What I'm trying to understand is, say, for instance, within Medicare, which I know that's not what you do, but in Medicare fee for service, there's the case mix index, and so the case mix index is reflected by the documentation, and a higher case mix index basically reflects in a higher payment from Medicare. And there's efforts made to improve the case mix index documentation for for groups of patients such that it reflects the care delivered. In commercial, if there's the element of price that gets negotiated into this as well, because we're not fixed prices like Medicare. So as case mix index increases, the equivalent of case mix index within commercial, higher amounts are paid for the same care, which is true with Medicare, but prices have been established over time to support hospital budgets with less rigorous documentation. So there's this nuanced thing that occurs that if no different services are being provided at these high prices, you end up generating more revenue. Hospitals would generate more revenue and thus cost more than would be expected. And I'm trying to figure out if that could be related to this recent surge that you discussed in your testimony. So is there any sort of, do you think that, is there any indication that that's playing into this cost surge?
Yeah, I have not done a deep dive to study if in fact that is the case. However, we do, last year during the hospital budget review process, we understood that there was going to be a focus at some of the facilities on the Medicare coding documentation as a way to improve the revenue coming through Medicare. And we were concerned to a degree that would have a sort of a ripple effect, that as the process internally was improved to more accurately reflect that diagnosis codes and intensity, that it wouldn't be necessarily done just for Medicare patients, that it probably would trickle over into commercial. So that is a dynamic that we need to be watching. And to the degree that that occurs, then the experience will become higher, and it what does drive some of the trend. So that is part of the overall claims costs that our premiums have struggled to keep pace with that increase.
So a few questions. I'm trying to keep them in order in my head, but I think maybe I'm going to sort of divert a little bit because we got talking about this surge in cost through the spring here. And that you said it was, you broke it out. You said it's most notably within hospitals. And one component of that was expensive therapeutics, expensive like chemotherapy agents, for instance. Are there other components of the hospital increase that are outliers?
We, based on the data that we have so far, that is the one of the things that stuck out. Everything else seems to be sort of increasing generally, but we continue to look at that.
Increasing generally over the forecasted?
Yeah, sort of the all aspects of the medical costs. The main takeaway for the April and May surge is that it was focused more on the medical side and more in the facilities and not in prescription drug. I think we've had a lot of increases over the last few years, and they're often driven by this escalation in the prescription drug trends. So my purpose in highlighting that was just to make sure that we understood that it was in the medical category that we were seeing the surge. And we continue to look at it.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all I needed to say.
Okay, and do you know if that surge is occurring in the 46% of the non-board regulated entities as well as the 54% of the board regulated entities?
I do not know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I do know that it is happening in the hospitals that typically proportionately have a high share of our overall claims. But again, that is something that Ms. Lemieux could speak to more.
Okay, so do you think she'd be able to give a distribution of that surge if it's happening in specific institutions or?
Probably not today. If there's something specific that you would find helpful, we can take it as a follow-up.
Okay, thanks. Give me a second. I just need to look through my notes here for a moment. Mr. D'Onofrio said, and I don't know if he's still on or if he would be able to speak now, but the Vermont healthcare costs are rising at unsustainable rates. And I was curious if he has any information of comparison of that he looks at or that you look at compared to other states or regions of the country for comparison. Is it your position, Blue Cross Blue Shield? I'm asking you to speak for him, but for you, Ms. Green, is it your position that costs are rising in Vermont differently than other regions of the country, or do you think this is a similar or even trend?
I will say that the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont management leadership team has been very interested in the materials that the Green Mountain Care Board actually has been publishing around comparisons of Vermont costs to costs nationally, and it does seem, based on that information, that Vermont costs are higher than many other parts of the country.
Okay. And does Blue Cross Blue Shield have any other information they use for those comparisons that you think would be helpful for the board to use or understand?
Other than the comparisons that we included in the responses to the questions, I would have to defer to the team to answer that question.
Okay. Thanks. I think I'm getting near the end here. Sorry, they got a little jumbled with different people's questions. That Tom Walsh brought up Exhibit 19, page 15. Sorry, it wasn't Tom. It was Eric Schulteis. That we continue to closely monitor hospitals that exceed their commercial rate commitment and plan to approach them for relief. Can you describe what that relief might look like?
The conversation takes the form of us sharing with each of the hospitals that we're talking with sort of our understanding of how the previous year unfolded, and then the hospital has to look at their own analysis and our analysis, and so the relief is sort of in the context of the committed rate in the contract, to say that if there was a commitment made that was exceeded, we calculate, quantify the value of that, and talk with the hospital about either receiving some of that money back or some sort of future contract change or something along those lines.
It is a process that you have done in the recent years at all?
As I mentioned, the monitoring process we've done in the past, but it was only in recent years where we were noticing that there were some things that we needed to more deliberately follow up on, because an average hospital with a typical contract might be over in some years and under in some years, and as long as it kind of evens out over time and is of a modest amount, there would be sort of just a mutual understanding of that information as it goes into whatever the next year's contract conversations are. But we, this is something that we do regularly, but it was worth mentioning because we have some items that we expect to be following up with.
Are there specific hospitals that tend to be continuously under or continuously over, or frequently under or frequently over the contract allowed amounts? And we can speak about that in executive session if needed.
Yeah, I think that would be good. We can also talk with Dr. Weigel, who's testifying as well in executive session. But it tends to be the larger hospitals, because the larger hospitals, if an assumption is off, it would throw off a larger variance.
I'm maybe more asking less about the variance from but the trend of being on one side or the other.
Yeah, I can say that the trend that we're seeing in a couple of hospitals is that it's been over, but again, the backdrop of post-COVID has made it very difficult to discern, whether or not that is something that is sort of an unusual one-off because of care mix, et cetera, or if it's sort of a more fundamental assumption in how the contracting is pulled together. So I'm a little reluctant to call it a trend because trends have been very up and down lately.
Okay, I appreciate that. I know that you came up first largely to talk about RBC and the crisis of the RBC situation at Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I have one question for you related to that, which is, does Blue Cross Blue Shield as part of a national blues, and all your peer blues around the country, do you compare your RBC ranges to other RBC ranges, barring the state related goals, but what is the peer group RBC range that's acceptable within the national blues, or is there one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the collection of blues plans in total tend to have a weighted average RBC that is much higher than even our required range. When we set our required range of 590 to 745, it was relatively low among peer group blue plans. That said, we also have a well-established monitoring level for blue plans that is 375 RBC. So any blue plan that drops to that level or trends towards that level over a couple of years is often talking with the association. But the vast majority of the blue plans are at RBC levels much, much higher.
And are there specific numbers that are used above that 375 that the Blue Association recommends?
In terms of above 375, do you mean?
Yeah, like is there a range that they feel is healthy?
Yeah, the association, I won't speak for them, but my understanding is that they, like the NEIC, which is the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, recognize that the RBC is set for each entity, and it's unique for the risks taken on by that entity. So I think they would struggle, not the right word, but they would struggle to set one RBC for all blue plans. So, and I think L&E has commented about that. And certainly the report that was issued when our target range was published, it very much talks about that each company has a unique range that they need to manage within based on the risks that they write.
Okay. I have one more question. It's kind of like it's a fairly awkward question to ask, but I want to sort of just bring up a common critique of health insurers that I hear sort of, I'm a physician and there's, here we go. I've got all these, ACEP weekly, these things come in my mail on a daily basis. Common critique of insurers is that one of the big reasons for growth in healthcare costs in the United States is the profit-seeking behavior of insurance companies, whether it's profit-seeking in nonprofits or profiteering in for-profits, that's driving up the cost of care, high salaries, big bonuses. I was just wondering if you could discuss your thoughts and address that critique.
Sure, I appreciate the candor. Blue Cross is a not-for-profit company. I think you can see from the information that we've provided in testimony that we are not making loads of money. We are, in fact, losing lots of money. We are here to serve Vermonters, and we're focused on serving as many markets in Vermont for Vermonters as we can. In terms of large salaries of executive pay, our board reviews that every year, and it's benchmarked against similar-sized companies, and that is shared every year in a report with the Department of Financial Regulation. So I think operating in Vermont on behalf of Vermonters is, in my opinion, very different than what some other markets might be experiencing in terms of how insurance companies might be operating or behaving in their local markets.
Great. Thanks for your testimony this morning. Thanks for taking my questions.
Thanks.
Board Member Lund, you have questions?
Thank you. I do. Thank you, Ms. Green. Is it okay if I call you Ruth?
Yes, please.
Thank you. And of course, call me Robin if you'd like. So I do have a couple questions. I think, quite frankly, most of mine will be for executive session because I wanted to ask about some of the redacted areas of your pre-filed testimony and also for a little more information on the Medicare Advantage business that you've talked about a little bit. So in your pre-filed testimony, which is in tab 19 on page 5, you indicate that you have active plans to, quote, improve revenue and margin across other lines of business, unquote. Could you speak in a little more depth to those plans?
Sure. That page 5 of the testimony.
Yes, it's page 5, the red page 5.
Okay, thanks. Nonetheless, thank you.
It's line, do you need the lines? It's lines 20
no,
to
I'm
21.
fine. I was just looking for the reference. The increased revenues in other lines of business, the board is aware that for many years we serve large clients that are often due to the competitive market and the process of a request for proposal or RFPs. The rates that we're able to renew and win that business are below the cost of serving those businesses. That said, we have implemented, because of the need to have all of our market segments pay their way, we have been implementing and we've been successful having new types of revenue for services that we do on behalf of these large clients, and they benefit, and then we share in the savings in a way that adds to the bottom line and reduces the losses on that book of business.
Thank you. And if this is executive session, please just let me know and I'll save it. Would that include, for example, state employees, teachers, and as large clients that you bid for?
It would be all of the large clients that we bid for, and each of those contracts is somewhat unique, and we can go into more detail in executive session if required. But each client relationship has, some of those relationships utilize our pharmacy, PBM, others do not, and so each circumstance leads us to a different set of levers to talk about with those clients.
Thank you. So on page, so if you could turn to pages 14 and 15 of your pre-filed testimony in tab 19.
Sure.
So on the top of page 14, there's a chart that shows a comparison of member months to capital requirements. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And
just
that particular chart is redacted. It's hard to see. There's a blue.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. I'll save it. I didn't notice the line around it, so I appreciate that pointing that out. Okay, so I'll come back to that. Lower down on that same page, there's a reference to Medicare supplemental products and the premium increases in 2025. We don't regulate, as you know, Medicare Sup, so I had a couple questions about the filings there. Do you have an RBC or a CTR contribution? I'm sorry, a CTR contribution in Med Sup plans?
Yes, we do, and it historically has been the same as our other insured businesses, and we will be seeking the 7% on that rate as well.
Okay, thank you. That was my question. And then on page 15 in the fourth bullet down, you indicate that you're seeking a number of formulary changes, or you're contemplating a number of formulary changes. How frequently do you typically do formulary changes?
Yes, we have to watch formularies constantly because of the way the pharmaceutical industry shifts, and our PBM helps us keep up with that. We make formulary changes typically twice a year, and they both cycles require a very disciplined communication in advance, communication to members impacted, et cetera. It's usually changes that come with the turn of the calendar to January, and then there's usually a change. Well, there might be a change mid-year. We don't have to do them twice a year, but if there's a need for a change, we can do them mid-year with the appropriate notice.
Okay, thank you. So what, in terms of doing something differently from normal related to the RBC range, have you been contemplating with formulary changes? Or is this just your normal review?
Yeah, well, I think normal, it's hard to describe what normal would be, but because the pharmaceutical company or pharmaceutical companies have a lot of drugs that are moving through approval, and some of them are brand and some of them are generic, et cetera. A lot of times the formulary changes are related to moving drugs between tiers because, for instance, maybe a biosimilar has come out and been accepted by the medical community as a replacement drug, and that might be a significantly more cost-effective option. And so working with our PBM, we would be watching that and making those types of changes. I would say we do that on a regular basis, and then, you know, depending on what's going on with FDA approvals, et cetera, there may be years where there's more changes, and there might be years where there's less changes.
Okay. All right. So I'll just ask one more time, how is that connected to moving towards the ordered range?
Right. So when we develop the rates for 2025, we have to make certain assumptions about the cost of medical care and the pharmaceutical care, and it assumes certain formularies. So what we're doing here is saying, okay, we have to keep working that lever, and if we find an opportunity to make a change that we find we can make and can make it mid-year, that for the half year that that's implemented, that would fall, because the rates have been set for that year, that would fall to RBC, but then the cost improvement in those changes would fall into the next year's rate premium rating because it comes in as part of experience. So it's kind of related to the timing, and we just know we have to not wait till the following year to make that happen, and especially under today's circumstances, we don't want to leave any money on the table, so to speak, as those changes happen.
Okay, thank you. On page 17 of your pre-filed testimony, you talk a little bit about the affiliation with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. And I'll give you a moment to get there.
On page 17 of Exhibit 19.
Oh, I apologize, page 18. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong page numbers. Okay,
no,
thank you.
I see the questions you're referring to now.
Thank you. So I know that you have been speaking with them about transitioning your technology systems and expect, as you note here, to forego substantial expenditures on technology. Could you please, do you have a quantification of that? And also, could you give us an update on when you expect to transition your technology and systems?
Sure. So the way to think about the foregoing substantial expenditures is one of the challenges that we have operating as a small, locally focused Vermont company is that we lack the resources to invest in some of the newer technologies. And examples might be the data technologies that are required to back some of the member and provider facing services, portals, and apps, et cetera. So we have not been able to keep pace with those technologies because it requires a large investment. So that is, in fact, one of the large drivers behind our seeking an affiliation. We wanted to affiliate with a company who has significant capabilities in that space, and they've already built them, so we don't have to start from scratch and build those. The thing that is needs to be clear is that those costs are costs we're going to avoid, so we could not put them in premiums because our marketplace really can't afford these large investments. So what we'll do is be able to access those capabilities, pay something reasonable to have access to those capabilities, and forego having to do the first dollar investment is what we say. In terms of timing, we are working through the planning for that. Since the affiliation was approved last fall, we have been taking inventory of the more detailed technologies and figuring out what order, where do you start and how do you build on that. And that planning is continuing into this year. We do expect to understand what the order and pace will look like, and it will happen over a number of months or years as we work through that. But it should begin soon in terms of the Vermont technology being able to take advantage of some of the Michigan capabilities, perhaps as soon as next year.
Would you expect that some of the technology would help with cost containment?
I would expect that some could help with cost containment. More likely, and this is what we see all the time, is often when we want to implement a new program, whether it's for example, say a pharmacy benefit management program or a medical management program, we're quite often working with tools and vendors that are cost prohibitive. And so we're looking for both some efficiencies as well as being able to cost effectively implement programs that up to this point we haven't been able to do so in terms of technology and tools.
Okay, thank you. I think everything else I have is for executive session.
Hey, Board Member Holmes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Green. I guess I just first want to acknowledge I recognize it's a tough year to come before the board. It's also a tough year to sit on the board, but yeah, it's just a tough year all around. So actually, some of my questions have been asked and answered. That's helpful. A few I think I still have for executive session. I think I'm just going to put in a request that for 2 follow-ups because of questions that I've heard already, questions that I had. So maybe just putting in a request for the two things. One is how the higher than projected medical facility utilization is distributed across both Vermont and border New Hampshire hospitals. So expected utilization the excess utilization basically by hospital, I think would be probably answer a lot of our questions. And I would, if it's possible, I'd like to include those New Hampshire border hospitals where a lot of Vermonters get their care. And then the second follow-up question is whether or not it'd be possible to get that historical breakdown, historical 5 to 7 years, I don't know, something like that, of the overage or underage of commercial rate commitments, again, by hospital. And then whether relief for overages were granted. If you have that, I think that might be helpful to all of us. Or at least I'll say to me, but I'm guessing from the questions of my prior board members, it might help us. And if somebody wants to amend or add something to that, we can get to, but I think that would be helpful to us. I think we're really trying to understand what's been happening at the hospital level, since, as you know, we regulate the hospital level. And so it's helpful for us to hear from your viewpoint, what's happening with overages and how what we think we're doing in hospital budget decisions are translating into what actually happens on the ground. So those are my two requests. And then I have just a couple questions at this point. One is I'm trying to understand a little bit better the relationship between membership size and RBC. So in particular, looking at there's been like about a 40% growth in QHP members on the individual market between 22 and 24. So I'm wondering, how has that impacted RBC?
Yes, the growth in individual QHP has impacted RBC through that authorized control level calculation. So the additional membership and the claims that the estimated claims that they bring with them serves to increase the authorized control level, which then means we need more surplus or member reserves in the numerator to sustain RBC. Some of that growth came from the Medicaid redetermination. That was another thing that happened somewhat uniquely over the last couple of years, because during COVID, my understanding is that the state could not remove anyone from the Medicaid roll. So after a certain period of time, I'm forgetting exactly when it started, but they had to recertify all of those people, and we knew that some of the qualified health plan individuals would come to us, and so that was a source of some of that growth. But yes, hopefully that answered both pieces.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm also then trying to think about the rates that you're requesting this year are substantial, that's an understatement, or high. And I'm wondering if there's been an analysis of the impact of these particularly high rate requests on expected membership, which would likely decline or potentially could decline. These are going to be, I will use the term unaffordable for some people. I know there's lots of ways that we're trying to define affordability, but there are going to be some people who are not going to be able to absorb these rate increases. And so I'm wondering if Blue Cross Blue Shield has done an analysis on the expected reduction in membership as a result of the rate increases, and then how that will impact RBC.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first and foremost, we need to ensure that the premium rates for the membership that we have and expect to renew are fully funded and include sufficient RBC or sufficient CTR to support our RBC recovery. You're right, though, with such high increases and not a lot of choices. People don't have a lot of choices on what to do if they can't afford Blue Cross's increase. We do expect that we might lose some membership. And the impact of that loss of membership in the short run will help relieve some pressure on RBC. You're absolutely right. But it is not the way that we would sort of sustainably repair the RBC levels, given that ultimately we need to have an ongoing and continuing presence in the market to, provide coverage to people who want blue network coverage. So yes, it will. We can estimate. We know that some of the modeling, maybe a rule of thumb, is if we were to lose as much as 25,000 members as a result of this, that's a huge number. That would serve to increase RBC by 100 percentage points. So it would take a lot of membership losses